The emergency beacon cut through subspace like a knife through silk, carrying with it the desperation of a dying civilization. Commander Vexhai of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force received the transmission aboard his flagship, the Harmony's Edge, as his crew monitored the Outer Rim territories. "Commander, we're receiving a distress signal from the Kepler 442 system," reported Lieutenant Zarath, her tentacles dancing across the holographic interface. "It's from the Altarian colony on Kepler 442b. Vexhai's scaled features tightened as he reviewed the transmission. The Altarians were a peaceful species, known throughout the galaxy for their diplomatic nature and advanced agricultural techniques. Their colonies were considered among the safest in civilized space. "What's their situation?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of command that had seen him through 40 years of peacekeeping operations. The transmission crackled to life, filled with static and the unmistakable sounds of battle. A female Altarian voice, strained with fear and exhaustion, broke through the interference. "This is Governor Melandra of New Altaria. We are under attack by the Vorthak Horde. Our defensive systems have failed. We have approximately 3 million civilians trapped on the surface. The Vorthak are... They're not taking prisoners. Please, anyone who receives this message, we need immediate military assistance. We can hold for maybe 72 hours, but we need backup. We need help." Vexhai felt his blood run cold. The Vorthak Horde was a name whispered in fear across the galaxy. They were raiders, savages who swept through space like a plague, leaving nothing but death and destruction in their wake. They had been quiet for months, leading many to hope they had finally been scattered or destroyed by their own violence. "How many ships do we have in range?" Vexhai demanded. Lieutenant Zarath's expression grew grim. "3 patrol vessels, sir. The Swift Current, the Peaceful Dawn, and the Nebula's Rest. Combined, they carry maybe 200 peacekeepers, the Vorthak fleet that attacked New Altaria numbers in the hundreds." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Every officer present understood the mathematics of the situation. Even with their superior training and technology, 200 peacekeepers could not stand against a Vorthak horde of that size. It would be suicide. "Sir," Communications Officer Thren spoke up, his voice hesitant. "There is another option. The Sol system has a garrison. They're only 18 light-years from Kepler 442. Vexhai's inner eyelids fluttered, a sign of deep thought among his species. "The humans?" "Yes, sir. The Terran Defense Force has a rapid response unit stationed at their outer system defensive platform. They've been requesting assignment to peacekeeping operations for months." The commander had heard of humans, of course. They were the newest species to join the Galactic Peacekeeping Force, having only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last 50 years. Their planet, Earth, was classified as a Class 12 death world, which had raised eyebrows throughout the galactic community. Most sentient species evolved on Class 3 or 4 worlds, with mild climates and few natural predators. Earth, by contrast, was a nightmare of extreme weather, violent geological activity, and an ecosystem where everything seemed designed to kill everything else. The fact that humans had not only survived, but thrived on such a world had made them objects of both curiosity and concern among the galactic community. "What do we know about their military capabilities?" Vexhai asked. Lieutenant Zarath pulled up the available files. "Limited data, sir. They've only participated in training exercises so far. Their technology is unusual. They seem to favor kinetic weapons over energy-based systems. Their ship designs prioritize armor and firepower over shields and speed. The consensus among the analysts is that their approach is somewhat primitive, but potentially effective." Vexhai reviewed the human files on his personal display. The species was relatively young, having only unified their homeworld within the last few centuries. Their history was marked by constant warfare, which explained their military focus. They had fought with everything from sticks and stones to nuclear weapons before finally learning to cooperate. Their psychological profile is interesting, Zarath continued. They show remarkable resilience under pressure and an almost irrational willingness to sacrifice themselves for others, even members of different species. The xenopsychologists are still trying to understand their pack-bonding behavior. The transmission from New Altaria crackled again, more desperate this time. This is New Altaria. The Vorthak have broken through our outer perimeter. We estimate 36 hours until they reach the civilian shelters. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need immediate assistance. Our children... Please. Vexhai made his decision. Open a channel to the Sol system. Priority 1 military frequency. Sir, are you certain? Thren asked. The humans are untested in actual combat. We don't know how they'll perform under pressure. Right now, they're the only backup available, Vexhai replied grimly. And according to their profiles, pressure is what they're designed for. The connection to the Sol system took several minutes to establish. When the channel finally opened, a human face appeared on the main screen. The being was relatively small compared to most galactic species, with pale skin, dark hair, and those distinctive forward-facing predator eyes that marked their species as evolved hunters. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. How can we assist you, Commander Vexhai? The human spoke standard galactic with only a slight accent, and Vexhai noted the calm confidence in her voice, despite receiving an unexpected priority communication. Admiral Chen, we have a code-red emergency situation in the Kepler 442 system. The Altarian colony of New Altaria is under attack by the Vorthak Horde. 3 million civilians are trapped and requesting immediate military assistance. The human's expression didn't change, but Vexhai noticed a subtle hardening around her eyes. How many Vorthak ships? Intelligence estimates between 400 and 600 vessels. And friendly forces? 3 patrol vessels with a combined crew of 200 peacekeepers. Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment, and Vexhai could see her processing the information. What's your ETA to the system? At maximum speed, 14 hours. We can be there in 6, Chen said without hesitation. How many civilians did you say? 3 million. The human nodded once, sharply. Understood. We're scrambling the 5th Fleet immediately. Admiral Chen out. The connection closed, leaving Vexhai staring at a blank screen. He had expected questions about the odds, requests for additional support, perhaps even a polite decline given the impossible nature of the situation. Instead, the humans had simply accepted the mission and promised to arrive before his own forces. Sir, Zarath said quietly, the human fleet departing Sol system. Our sensors are picking up significant energy signatures. How significant? 68 vessels, sir, and they're moving faster than our intelligence suggested their ships were capable of. Vexhai settled back in his command chair, a feeling of unease growing in his chest. The humans had just committed nearly 70 warships to a battle that any sane species would consider hopeless. Either they were incredibly brave, incredibly stupid, or they knew something about warfare that the rest of the galaxy didn't. As the Harmony's Edge began its journey toward Kepler 442, Vexhai found himself wondering what exactly they had just unleashed. The humans came from a death world, had evolved as predators, and had spent their entire history fighting. Now they were racing toward a battle that would test every one of those characteristics. The emergency beacon from New Altaria continued to broadcast, a desperate cry for help echoing through the void. But for the first time since receiving the transmission, Vexhai felt a glimmer of hope. The cavalry was coming, and they came from a world where survival meant being tougher than everything trying to kill you. In 6 hours, the galaxy would learn what humans meant when they promised backup. The bridge of the Harmony's edge hummed with nervous energy as they raced toward Kepler 442. Every few minutes, updated reports came in from their long-range sensors and the few automated monitoring stations in the system. The news was consistently grim. "The Vorthak have established orbital superiority," reported sensor specialist Kethvar. "They're systematically destroying New Altaria's defensive satellites and have begun bombardment of military installations." Vexhai studied the tactical display, his experienced eye picking out the Vorthak battle formation. It was typical of their style, overwhelming force applied without finesse or strategy. They surrounded the planet like a swarm of angry insects, their ships varying wildly in size and design as befitted a pirate confederation. "Any word from the human fleet?" he asked. "They went dark about an hour ago," Communications Officer Thren replied. "Standard military practice, I believe. They're maintaining communications silence to avoid detection." Vexhai nodded, though the human's silence bothered him more than he cared to admit. In his experience, Allied forces coordinated constantly during joint operations. The human's decision to operate independently suggested either supreme confidence or dangerous recklessness. Another transmission from New Altaria broke through the static, weaker than before. Governor Melandra's voice was barely recognizable, strained with exhaustion and despair. "This is New Altaria. We've lost our primary power grid. Emergency shelters are running on backup power only. The Vorthak have landed ground forces in the northern continent. We have perhaps 18 hours before they reach the main population centers. If anyone is coming to help us, please hurry. We're running out of time." The bridge crew exchanged grim looks. Even if they pushed their ships beyond safety limits, they were still 10 hours away. The humans would arrive first. But 68 ships against several hundred seemed like a futile gesture. "Sir," Lieutenant Zarath said suddenly, her voice tight with excitement, "I'm detecting massive energy discharges from the direction of the Sol System Fleet's approach vector. Put it on the main display." The tactical screen shifted to show the space around Kepler 442. For a moment, nothing seemed different. Then, like flowers blooming in fast motion, brilliant points of light began appearing throughout the system. "What am I looking at?" Vexhai demanded. Zarath's tentacles flew across her console. "Jump signatures, sir. 68 of them. The human fleet just translated out of faster-than-light travel simultaneously across a three-dimensional formation spanning the entire Kepler 442 system." Vexhai leaned forward, studying the display with growing amazement. The humans hadn't simply arrived at the system and begun an approach to the planet. They had calculated their jump coordinates so precisely that they emerged from FTL travel already in optimal combat positions throughout the system. "That's impossible," whispered Navigation Officer Delmar. "The computational power required for that kind of coordinated translation." "The humans have surrounded the Vorthak fleet," Zarath reported, her voice filled with disbelief. "They're in a three-dimensional encirclement pattern. The Vorthak are trapped between the human fleet and the planet they're attacking." Vexhai felt his breathing slow as the tactical implications became clear. In one move, the humans had turned the Vorthak's numerical advantage into a liability. The Raider fleet was now caught between defending their position around the planet and responding to threats from multiple vectors. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet," Thren announced. "Put it through." The main screen flickered, and Admiral Chen's face appeared. Behind her, Vexhai could see the bridge of her flagship buzzing with activity. Human crew members moved with precise efficiency, their voices calling out status reports and tactical updates. "Commander Vexhai, this is Admiral Chen. We've arrived at Kepler 442 and have the Vorthak fleet surrounded. We're beginning combat operations immediately." "Admiral, the Vorthak outnumber you nearly 10 to 1. Chen's expression didn't change. "Understood, Commander. We'll try to keep some of them alive for you to question. Chen out." The transmission ended. leaving Vex-High staring at a blank screen once again. The human admiral had just dismissed odds that would give any sane military commander nightmares. "Sir, the human fleet is beginning their attack," Zarath reported. On the tactical display, the human ships began moving inward toward the Vorthak formation. What happened next would be remembered in military academies throughout the galaxy for generations to come. The first indication that something unprecedented was occurring came from the sensor readings. Human weapons signatures began appearing on the display, but they were unlike anything in the galactic database. "Those aren't energy weapons," Delmar said, his voice filled with confusion. "They're launching projectiles?" "Kinetic weapons," Vex-High confirmed, remembering the briefing notes. "They use mass and velocity instead of energy beams." What the sensor data couldn't convey was the devastating effectiveness of those primitive weapons. Human railguns hurled projectiles at significant fractions of light speed, while their missile systems deployed warheads that combined explosive force with kinetic energy in ways that overwhelmed Vorthak shield systems. The Vorthak, accustomed to fighting enemies who used energy weapons similar to their own, found their defensive systems inadequate against kinetic bombardment. Their shields, designed to disperse energy, were penetrated by solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. "The Vorthak fleet is taking heavy casualties," Zarath reported, her voice filled with amazement. "They're trying to break out of the encirclement, but the humans are maintaining formation." Vex-High watched in fascination as the human battle plan unfolded. Rather than engaging in the chaotic free-for-all that characterized most space battles, the human fleet moved with mechanical precision. They had divided the battlefield into sectors and were systematically destroying Vorthak ships in each area before moving to the next. "It's like watching a surgical procedure," whispered Communications Officer Thren. The Vorthak, despite their reputation for ferocity, were clearly unprepared for the human style of warfare. They had built their strategy around intimidation and overwhelming numbers, expecting their enemies to panic under pressure. The humans showed no signs of panic whatsoever. If anything, they seemed to become more efficient as the battle intensified. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from New Altaria," Thren announced. Governor Melandra's voice came through clearly for the first time in hours, filled with hope and disbelief. "This is Governor Melandra of New Altaria. The bombardment has stopped. We're detecting massive explosions in orbit. Are those our reinforcements?" Vex-High opened a channel to the planet. "Governor, this is Commander Vex-High of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. Terran Defense Force units have engaged the Vorthak fleet. You are no longer in immediate danger." "Terran Defense Force? You mean the humans? How many ships?" Vex-High glanced at his tactical display, where the battle continued to rage. 68 vessels, Governor." There was a long pause before Melandra responded. 68 ships are fighting hundreds of Vorthak vessels?" "Yes, Governor, and they appear to be winning." As if to emphasize his point, a massive explosion bloomed on the tactical display as a Vorthak heavy cruiser succumbed to human firepower. The explosion was followed by several smaller ones as other raider vessels were eliminated in quick succession. "The Vorthak fleet is beginning to retreat," Zarath reported. "No, wait! They're not retreating! They're surrendering!" Vex-High blinked in surprise. "Surrendering?" "Yes, sir. Multiple Vorthak vessels are powering down their weapons and transmitting surrender codes." This was unprecedented. The Vorthak never surrendered. They fought to the death as a matter of cultural pride, preferring to destroy their own ships rather than face capture. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communications channel again. "Commander Vex-High, we've secured the system. Vorthak casualties are approximately 60%. The remainder have surrendered. We're transmitting prisoner transfer protocols for your review." Vex-High could only stare at the tactical display, where human ships were now forming orderly groups around clusters of surrendering Vorthak vessels. In less than 4 hours, the human fleet had accomplished what should have been impossible. They had not only defeated a numerically superior enemy, but had done so decisively enough to break the Vorthak will to fight. For a species that valued martial prowess above all else, this represented a psychological victory as significant as the tactical one. "Admiral Chen," Vexhai said finally, "your performance has been remarkable." "Thank you, Commander. We'll maintain position until your forces arrive. New Altaria is secure." As the Harmony's Edge continued its approach to Kepler 442, Vexhai found himself reconsidering everything he thought he knew about the newest members of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. The humans had requested assignment to peacekeeping operations for months, and now he understood why. They hadn't been asking for the opportunity to serve alongside the galactic community. They had been offering to protect it. The aftermath of the Battle of Kepler 442 created ripples throughout the galactic community that would reshape interstellar relations for decades to come. Commander Vexhai stood on the observation deck of the Harmony's Edge, watching as human ships maintained their patrol patterns around the liberated planet below. 3 days had passed since the humans had arrived and shattered the Vorthak horde in what military historians were already calling the most decisive space battle in recorded history. Now, as Vexhai prepared to submit his official report, he found himself struggling to find words that would adequately convey what he had witnessed. "Sir, Admiral Chen is requesting permission to board," announced Lieutenant Zarath from behind him. Vexhai turned from the viewport, his scaled features reflecting the blue light from New Altaria's star. "Grant permission and prepare the formal reception area. This meeting deserves proper protocol." As they made their way to the docking bay, Vexhai reflected on the conversations he'd had over the past few days with various officials throughout the galaxy. The High Council wanted answers. The Military Strategic Planning Division wanted detailed analyses. Everyone wanted to understand how a species that had only been part of the galactic community for 50 years had achieved something that veteran civilizations with thousands of years of military experience would have considered impossible. The airlock cycled open, and Admiral Chen stepped aboard the Harmony's Edge. She was accompanied by 2 officers Vexhai hadn't met before, a tall human male with sharp features and calculating eyes, and a shorter human female whose relaxed posture somehow managed to suggest coiled violence. "Commander Vexhai," Admiral Chen said, offering the traditional galactic greeting gesture. "Thank you for hosting us." "Admiral Chen, the honor is entirely mine. Your performance at this engagement has been the subject of considerable discussion throughout the peacekeeping force." Chen's expression remained neutral, but Vexhai caught a brief flicker of something in her eyes. Concern, perhaps? "I hope our methods haven't caused any diplomatic complications." As they walked toward the conference room, Vexhai considered his response carefully. "On the contrary, Admiral, your intervention has saved 3 million lives and dealt a decisive blow to one of the most dangerous pirate confederations in known space. However, it has also raised questions about human military capabilities that the High Council would like answered." They entered the conference room, where Vexhai's senior staff waited. Introductions were made all around. The tall human officer was identified as Colonel Marcus Webb, Special Operations Division, while the female officer was Captain Rosa Martinez, Intelligence Analysis. "Before we begin," Chen said, settling into the specially adjusted chair provided for human physiology, "I want to express our gratitude for your trust in calling us for assistance. Many species would have hesitated to rely on unknown allies in such a critical situation." Vexhai activated the room's recording systems. "Admiral, I must admit that the decision was made primarily because you were the only available forces in range. However, your performance has exceeded all expectations. The High Council has asked me to conduct a formal debriefing to understand your tactical approach. Colonel Webb leaned forward slightly. Commander, before we discuss tactics, I think it's important that you understand something about human military philosophy. We don't view warfare as a separate discipline from survival. For our species, they're the same thing. Could you elaborate on that? Captain Martinez spoke for the first time, her voice carrying a slight accent that Vex High's translator couldn't quite place. Commander, your files indicate that most galactic species evolved on worlds classified as Class 3 or 4 in terms of environmental hostility. Earth is Class 12. For humans, every day of existence has been a battle against an environment actively trying to kill us. Vex High nodded. This much was in their species profile. Yes, we're aware that Earth is considered a death world. I don't think you fully understand what that means, Admiral Chen said gently. Let me give you some context. The gravity on Earth is approximately 1.3 times standard galactic gravity. Our atmosphere contains 21% oxygen, which is considered toxic to most species. We have weather patterns that can generate winds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour. Our tectonic plates are constantly shifting, creating earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. We have ice ages that last for thousands of years, followed by warming periods that melt our polar ice caps. Colonel Webb continued the explanation. Our ecosystem contains predators that can run faster than most galactic species' ground vehicles. We have insects whose venom can kill a human in minutes. Our oceans contain creatures larger than most starships, and some of them are predators. The plants in our forests compete for resources so aggressively that they release chemical weapons into the soil. And we're not even the dominant predator on our own planet, Martinez added, with what Vex High was learning to recognize as human humor. We achieved that status through intelligence, cooperation, and the development of tools. Vex High absorbed this information, trying to reconcile it with the relatively small, seemingly fragile beings sitting across from him. How does this relate to your military capabilities? Evolution, Commander, Chen said. For millions of years, our species has been selected for traits that allow us to survive in impossible conditions. We don't just endure stress, we perform better under pressure. We don't just adapt to changing situations, we anticipate and prepare for worst-case scenarios. We don't just fight when cornered, we excel at organized violence. The Admiral activated a portable display device. Let me show you our tactical analysis of the Vorthak engagement. The display showed a three-dimensional model of the battle, with human and Vorthak ships represented as different colored icons. As the simulation played, Chen provided commentary. The Vorthak fleet was positioned in a standard siege formation around New Alteria. Their ships were spread out to provide maximum coverage of the planet's surface while maintaining mutual support distances. From their perspective, this was optimal tactical positioning. From ours, Webb said, it was a perfect trap waiting to be sprung. The simulation showed the moment when the human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. Instead of appearing at the edge of the system and flying inward, as was standard military doctrine, they had materialized in a complex three-dimensional formation that completely surrounded the Vorthak fleet. This level of coordination should have been impossible, Vex High said, studying the display. The computational requirements for 68 ships to translate simultaneously into precise positions would be impossible for most species, Martinez agreed. But humans have been using distributed computing systems for centuries. Every ship in our fleet is connected to every other ship through quantum entanglement communication systems. We don't think in terms of individual vessels, we think in terms of the fleet as a single organism. Chen manipulated the display to show the opening moments of the battle. Once we achieved positional advantage, the engagement became a matter of execution. Vorthak ships are designed for raiding operations against lightly defended targets. They prioritize speed and intimidation over armor and sustained firepower. Human ships, Webb continued, are designed to fight other human ships. We've been building warships to face enemies who think like us, plan like us, and fight like us. The Vorthak never stood a chance. The simulation showed the systematic destruction of the Vorthak fleet. Vexhai watched in fascination as human ships maneuvered with mechanical precision, concentrating fire on specific targets until they were eliminated before moving to the next. "You showed no mercy," Vexhai observed. "We showed appropriate force," Chen corrected. "Commander, the Vorthak were engaged in the systematic extermination of 3 million civilians. Our rules of engagement were quite clear. Eliminate the threat with maximum efficiency and minimum risk to friendly forces." "But they surrendered eventually. That's unprecedented." Martinez leaned back in her chair. "The Vorthak are predators, Commander. They understand predator behavior. Once they realized they were fighting something higher up the food chain than themselves, their survival instincts overrode their cultural programming." Vexhai found this explanation both fascinating and disturbing. "Are you saying that humans are natural predators?" "We're saying that humans are natural survivors," Chen replied. "For our entire evolutionary history, survival has meant being better at violence than anything trying to do violence to us. We didn't choose to become the dominant military force on a death world. We had to become that or go extinct." Colonel Webb activated another section of the display. "Let me show you something else, Commander. This is our current fleet disposition." The display shifted to show the human ships currently patrolling the Kepler 442 system. Vexhai was surprised to see that they had reorganized into a complex pattern that provided overlapping coverage of every approach vector to the planet. "You're not just maintaining a presence," he said, studying the formation. "You're fortifying the system." "The Vorthak weren't the only threat in this region of space," Martinez explained. "Our intelligence analysis indicates at least 3 other pirate organizations that might attempt to capitalize on the perceived weakness of New Alteria following the attack. You're planning to stay?" Admiral Chen nodded. "Until a permanent peacekeeping presence can be established, yes. The people of New Alteria requested our protection, and we don't abandon our commitments." As the briefing continued, Vexhai found himself gaining a new appreciation for human military thinking. They didn't just fight battles. They solved problems. They didn't just respond to threats. They eliminated the conditions that allowed threats to emerge. "Admiral," he said finally, "I need to ask you directly. The High Council is concerned about human military capabilities. Some members are worried that your species might pose a threat to galactic peace." The 3 humans exchanged glances before Chen responded. "Commander, I understand their concern. When a new species demonstrates military capabilities that exceed established norms, it raises questions about their intentions. However," Webb added, "I think it's important to consider our track record. In the 50 years since first contact, humans have not initiated military action against any galactic species. We've honored every treaty and agreement. We've contributed to humanitarian efforts throughout the galaxy. Our military strength exists to protect the innocent and preserve peace," Chen said firmly, "not to conquer or dominate. The same evolutionary pressures that made us effective warriors also made us protective of those who cannot protect themselves." Martinez pulled up another display showing human involvement in various galactic humanitarian missions. "We've provided disaster relief on 17 different worlds. We've mediated 3 territorial disputes. We've contributed more resources to refugee assistance programs than any other species relative to our economic capacity." Vexhai studied the data, then looked back at the humans. "Why? Your species could easily demand significant concessions in exchange for military protection. Instead, you offer assistance freely." "Because that's who we are," Chen said simply. "Commander, every human alive today exists because our ancestors chose to protect their tribe instead of just themselves. We've extended that tribal instinct to include everyone who shares our commitment to civilization and peace. The meeting continued for several more hours, covering tactical details, technological specifications, and strategic implications. By the end, VexHi had filled several data storage units with information that would keep the Military Strategic Planning Division busy for months. As the human officers prepared to return to their ships, Chen paused at the airlock. "Commander, I hope our conversation has addressed the High Council's concerns." "It has raised as many questions as it has answered," VexHi admitted. "But I believe I understand your species better now. You're not conquerors. You're guardians." "That's exactly right," Chen agreed. "And as guardians, we take our responsibilities seriously. The galaxy is under our protection now, whether it realizes it or not." As the human shuttle departed, VexHi stood once again at the observation deck, watching their ships maintain their vigilant patrol around New Alteria. The implications of what he had learned were staggering. Humanity hadn't just joined the galactic community, they had quietly become its protectors. The question now was whether the rest of the galaxy was ready to accept protection from a species that had evolved on a death world, where survival meant being the most dangerous thing in any given situation. Looking at the efficiency and precision of the human patrol patterns, VexHi suspected they wouldn't have much choice in the matter. The humans were here, they were armed, and they had appointed themselves as guardians of galactic peace. For species that valued survival, that was either the best news possible or the most terrifying, depending on which side of human protection they found themselves. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, the reverberations of humanity's military demonstration had fundamentally altered the political landscape of the galaxy. In the Grand Council chambers of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force headquarters on Centauri Prime, representatives from 47 different species gathered for what many considered the most important session in galactic history. Commander VexHi, recently promoted to Admiral following his comprehensive report on human military capabilities, stood before the assembled delegates. His scaled features bore the weight of the knowledge he was about to share. Knowledge that would reshape how the galaxy viewed both threats and protection. "Honored delegates," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems, "I have been asked to present our findings regarding the human military intervention at Kepler 442 and the implications for galactic security." The chamber fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support systems accommodating dozens of different atmospheric requirements. Representatives from species as diverse as the crystalline Zephyrians and the gaseous Nebula Collective focused their attention on the central podium. Admiral VexHi activated the chamber's holographic display system, showing the current territorial map of the galaxy. Red zones indicated areas under threat from various pirate organizations, separatist movements, and aggressive expansionist species. The map contained far more red than anyone in the chamber was comfortable acknowledging. 6 months ago, we faced a crisis that exemplified the challenges confronting galactic peace, VexHi continued. The Vorthak Horde, with over 600 vessels, had trapped 3 million civilians on New Alteria. Our available forces numbered fewer than 200 personnel. By every tactical analysis, rescue was impossible. The Altarian delegate, Governor Melandra herself, rose slightly in acknowledgement. Her presence served as a living reminder of what had been at stake. The human response to our request for assistance has forced us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about military capability, tactical doctrine, and the nature of protective force in galactic society, VexHi said, manipulating the display to show the battle formations from Kepler 442. Councillor Thexan of the Rigelian Confederacy, a species known for their own military prowess, interrupted with a gesture of skepticism. Admiral, while we acknowledge the human success at Kepler 442, one engagement does not constitute sufficient evidence for the sweeping changes you're proposing to galactic defense policy. Vex High had expected this objection. Counselor Thexan raises an important point. However, the engagement at Kepler 442 was not an isolated incident. The holographic display shifted to show a map of human military activities over the past 6 months. Dozens of operation markers appeared throughout the galaxy, each representing a successful intervention by human forces. The Tarakan system pirate raids, eliminated by a single human destroyer. The Vegan territorial dispute, resolved by human negotiators backed by a small patrol fleet. The refugee crisis in the Outer Rim. Human ships provided transport and protection for over 2 million displaced persons. The Andromedean slave traders, their entire operation dismantled by human special forces. With each example, the red zones on the galactic map began to shift to green, indicating secured space. The pattern was unmistakable. Wherever humans deployed their forces, problems disappeared. Delegate Korthal of the Crystalline Assembly flickered with concern, her diamond-like form refracting light in patterns that expressed doubt. Admiral, these interventions were not authorized by this council. The humans are operating unilaterally throughout the galaxy. With remarkable results, interjected Governor Melandra. The humans haven't just provided military assistance, they've established protective networks. The Kepler 442 system hasn't just been defended, it's become the safest region of space in 3 sectors. Admiral Vex High nodded toward the Altarian governor. Governor Melandra's observation highlights a crucial point. Human military doctrine differs fundamentally from galactic norms. They don't simply respond to threats. They eliminate the conditions that allow threats to develop. He manipulated the display again, showing a detailed analysis of human fleet movements. Human ships don't patrol in the traditional sense. They establish what they call protective nets, overlapping coverage patterns that make it impossible for hostile forces to operate undetected in protected space. Counselor Thexan leaned forward, his warrior's instincts engaged despite his political concerns. Show us their tactical methodology. The display shifted to show a real-time simulation of human fleet operations. Human ships operate as a single organism rather than individual units. Their quantum communication systems allow instantaneous coordination across vast distances. When a threat is detected anywhere in their protective net, every human ship in the region responds simultaneously. This level of coordination should be impossible, muttered the delegate from the Machine Intelligence Collective, her synthetic voice carrying undertones of impressed disbelief. It would be impossible for most species, Vex High agreed. However, humans have been developing distributed computing and swarm intelligence for centuries. Their military applications of these technologies are simply the latest evolution of capabilities they've been refining since before they achieved spaceflight. The Venusian representative, Ambassador Stelmar, raised a concern that had been discussed in closed sessions for weeks. Admiral, the humans' protective activities are expanding. Our intelligence suggests they're establishing permanent bases in 12 different systems without formal territorial agreements. This was the heart of the matter, and Vex High had spent considerable time preparing for this moment. Ambassador Stelmar. That interpretation assumes human activities follow traditional patterns of territorial expansion. However, human bases are not established for territorial control. They're positioned for optimal protective coverage. He showed a new display depicting the strategic positioning of human installations. Every human base is located at the intersection of multiple shipping lanes, refugee routes, or areas of high pirate activity. They're not claiming territory. They're creating safe spaces. The distinction is important, added Admiral Chen's voice from the Chamber's communication system. The human admiral had been invited to address the council remotely from her flagship. Admiral Chen, Counselor Thexan acknowledged. Please elaborate on this distinction. Counselor, human military bases are not fortresses designed to project power outward. They're shelters designed to protect those seeking safety. Any civilian ship, regardless of species or political affiliation, can request protection at any human installation. We don't charge fees, demand political concessions, or impose territorial restrictions. The chamber buzzed with quiet conversations as delegates absorbed this information. The concept of military installations that served protective rather than aggressive functions was alien to most galactic military thinking. Governor Melandra stood to address the chamber. Honored delegates, I have seen human protective doctrine in practice. When the Vorthak attacked, we expected rescue forces to defend our planet and then withdraw once the threat was eliminated. Instead, the humans have established a permanent presence that has made our entire region the safest in the galaxy. Our shipping lanes are secure. Our children play without fear of raid sirens. Our agricultural exports have increased by 300% because traders know they can travel safely through our space. The humans haven't conquered us. They've liberated us from the fear that has shaped our society for generations. Ambassador Stelmar pressed the issue that concerned many delegates. Governor, what do the humans want in return for this protection? Nothing, Melandra replied simply. They've never requested payment, territorial concessions, or political agreements. When I asked Admiral Chen directly what New Alteria owed for their protection, she said that safety was not a commodity to be bought and sold. The chamber fell silent as delegates considered the implications. The idea of military protection, provided without expectation of reward, contradicted fundamental assumptions about interspecies relations that had governed galactic politics for millennia. Counselor Thexan spoke what many were thinking. Admiral Vexhai, you're describing a species that provides military protection as a public service. This is unprecedented in galactic history. It's unprecedented because most species didn't evolve under conditions that made protective behavior essential for survival, Vexhai replied. Humans developed on a world where individual survival required tribal cooperation. Their evolutionary instincts prioritize group protection over individual advancement. Admiral Chen's voice joined the discussion again. Counselor Thexan, I understand your skepticism. Most species achieve military power and then use it to advance their own interests. Human psychology doesn't work that way. We achieve military power because we feel compelled to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The same instincts that drove our ancestors to defend their tribes from predators now drive us to defend peaceful civilizations from raiders, slavers, and conquerors. We can't help ourselves. It's literally encoded in our biology. The delegate from the Hive Mind Collective, speaking through a dozen voices in perfect unison, posed the question that had been underlying the entire session. If humans provide protection without requiring anything in return, what prevents them from withdrawing that protection arbitrarily? Admiral Vexhai had studied human psychology extensively over the past months, and he believed he understood the answer. Delegate, humans don't withdraw protection once it's been extended. Their protective instincts are permanent. Once they've accepted responsibility for the safety of a population, that responsibility becomes part of their cultural identity. In human terms, Admiral Chen added, abandoning people under our protection would be equivalent to abandoning our own children. It's biologically and psychologically impossible for our species to do. The Crystalline Assembly's delegate flickered with patterns of contemplation. Admiral Chen, you're asking us to trust the future of galactic peace to your species' evolutionary psychology. No, Chen replied firmly. I'm informing you that the future of galactic peace is already dependent on our species' evolutionary psychology. The question isn't whether humans will continue providing protection. We will, because we can't do otherwise. The question is whether the galactic community wants to formalize this arrangement or continue pretending it doesn't exist. Counselor Thexan studied the tactical displays still showing human fleet positions throughout the galaxy. Admiral Vexhai, what are you recommending? Vexhai had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Counselors, I recommend that we formally recognize human protective operations and establish cooperative protocols. Human forces are already providing security for approximately 60% of galactic shipping routes and civilian populations. We can either work with them to optimize this protection or continue operating with conflicting command structures. Furthermore, he continued, I recommend establishing joint training programs. Human tactical doctrine has proven superior to conventional approaches in every engagement. If we're going to maintain effective peacekeeping forces, we need to learn from human experience. The chamber erupted in discussions as delegates debated among themselves. Some species were eager to formalize cooperation with the humans. Others worried about the precedent of granting such authority to a single species. Governor Melandra rose again to address the chamber. Honored delegates, I understand your concerns about human influence. However, I also understand what life was like before human protection and what it's like now. 3 million of my people are alive today because humans decided that our lives were worth protecting. The humans didn't ask for our permission before risking their lives to save ours. They didn't demand payment or political concessions. They simply saw people in danger and decided to help. If that's the kind of species we're worried about having too much influence, then our priorities are fundamentally wrong. The vote, when it came, was closer than Admiral Vexhai had hoped, but decisive enough to establish policy. The Galactic Peacekeeping Force would formally recognize human protective operations and establish cooperative command structures for joint missions. More importantly, the Council voted to establish the Human Integration Program, designed to incorporate human tactical doctrine and protective philosophy into galactic peacekeeping operations. As the session concluded and delegates began to disperse, Admiral Vexhai reflected on how completely the galaxy had changed in just 6 months. The humans had arrived as junior members of the galactic community, requesting opportunities to serve alongside established peacekeeping forces. Instead, they had quietly become the primary guarantors of galactic security, not through conquest or political maneuvering, but simply by being better at protecting people than anyone else. Standing at the observation deck overlooking Centauri Prime's vast cityscape, Vexhai watched human patrol ships maintaining their vigilant presence around the planet. The sight had become common throughout the galaxy, human vessels standing guard over populations that had learned to sleep peacefully, knowing that someone was watching over them. The galaxy had requested backup when they called for human assistance at Kepler 442. What they had received was something far more valuable: permanent guardians who considered the protection of innocent life to be not just a duty, but the fundamental purpose of their existence. The age of fear was ending. The age of human protection had begun, and for 3 million Altarians, 60 billion beings throughout the galaxy, and countless more who would never know how close they had come to danger, that made all the difference in the universe.